Thank you so much. We're here with the director of Shoshana, Michael Winterbottom. We're so excited to have you here. Let's start with telling us a little bit about why you wanted to make this film.
The starting point was a long time ago. I was at the Jerusalem Film Festival, and I was there for a few days, and I read a book by a historian called Tom Segev, an Israeli historian, about the British Mandate, the time when Britain was in charge of Palestine from the First World War to the Second World War. And I realized I didn't know that much about that time. And it's a great book. It made it seem like an interesting time and place. And that was the starting point for starting to kind of read more widely around the subject.
It really is. I mean, for me, the kind of coming from a British perspective of that period of time, it's often told either from an Israeli Zionist perspective or a Palestinian Arab perspective, and obviously this third player there that played a crucial role to get that perspective. Where did you find that different than what you knew?
Well, I think like most people in Britain, what I knew about the sort of time Britain's role in Palestine, in the formation of Israel, was really about the after the Second World War period, the period when really all the kind of Jewish groups were united in opposition to fighting against the British occupation. I didn't really know that much about the time between the two wars. The time, Britain went in and during the First World War was running Palestine for the whole period up to the Second World War. And that was a much more kind of nuanced and kind of complicated relationship between Britain as a colonial power and the Jewish population and the Arab population. What it seemed to me like, the starting point was like that world just seemed interesting. The world of, people coming from Europe, British people obviously come from Europe as the colonial power, but Jewish people coming from Europe trying to wanting to build Israel, building a new city, Tel Aviv. They just seemed like a kind of young people with political, kind of political ideas, political ideals. It seemed like an interesting world to set a story. But what happened was we started researching. Had a researcher in Israel. We started reading around the subject. It was really when we came across the story of Tom Wilkin and Shoshana that kind of like we kind of felt like, okay, there's a film here that we might want to make. Because when you're making a film, it's in the end you're telling the story of people, in this case, real people, individual stories. And it just felt that in that relationship between Tom and Shoshana, you could feel a lot of the bigger social forces, that feel a lot of, the bigger contradictions in the kind of world in general. But that their personal story was simple, and you could really try and engage with that in a film.
And Shoshana's story really, when I was talking to a historian about it, I was like, wow, that's drama. There's real drama there for a movie, for her to be in this place in between these, I guess, two worlds or multiple worlds is really the core of some real conflict and depth. Um, the fact that you did this research is, of course, amazing. How do you begin to tell the story? I'm sure you've got the no, it happened this way, no, it happened that way. Nobody has ever agreed on anything that has ever happened in this conflict. So, how did you manage that?
I think for the world in general, there's quite a lot of first-hand accounts. We read a lot of people's accounts at the time, living in Tel Aviv, living in Palestine in general. There's also great film archives. So, we went to Israel a few times, went to the film archives, saw all the material they had. There's a couple of great documentaries which are full of archive from the time. So you get a flavor of the world. It's quite, you get quite a vivid sense of the world. In the case of Wilkin and Tom Wilkin and Shoshana's story, there was like we had the outline. Came across the outline of the story. We didn't have as much information as we would have liked. Geoffrey Morton, who's a colleague of Wilkin, wrote his autobiography. So we had Morton's autobiography. Wilkin, we knew only really the outline of the story, the facts of the story. We met up with Shoshana's family, but again, in a way, like whenever you do a film like this, I've made a lot of films based on real stories. So we want to respect the facts. With the facts we have, we try and respect those facts. But the detail, obviously, the detail of Shoshana and Tom's relationship, you have to imagine that, that gives the actors and us as the writers and directors the sort of space to try and imagine it and make that feel as vivid as possible. And what I would say in relation to Shoshana, afterwards we showed the film to Shoshana's family, and they felt that we had captured something close to the real person.
Wow. So that's a good reaction and pretty safe. I was gonna ask, like, what have the reactions been from those involved, and good that it's so far positive.
So
Um,
surprisingly, we showed it both to Jeffrey Morton's family and to Stern's family, Abraham Stern's family, and they are pretty much at the opposite extremes of political wings or ideology. But both felt we'd sort of respected the kind of their relatives.
that's rare, and I too have felt that there was a balance there. Have you gotten any criticism from any sides?
I'm sure we've got lots of criticism, but not nothing directly to my face, or nothing that I've actually directly heard. From terms of people, from people involved, and obviously, like there's lots of things, lots of things that you don't know. You have to imagine there's areas where when you find a fact, you try and use it. So, for example, we interviewed one of the people who killed Tom Wilkin. So we took his description of the killing of Tom Wilkin and used that to base our filming of that killing because obviously he described what happened, so we knew that was true, and therefore we obviously wanted to use that. On the other hand, with Zeroni, Zeroni is the person you see being waterboarded by the British. So he wrote his memoir. He said that's what happened. On the other hand, the British denied it. So when you have conflicting accounts of the same incident, you have to try and decide what you feel is most likely, or what you feel you're justified in doing, and those decisions are difficult. But in that particular case, we felt we should put that in, even though it's disputed, because I think whatever the details of that particular moment, for sure, the British were using repressive measures against both the Jewish population and the Arab population.
Wow, it's a tough decision. Often, I believe that when you put something into film, you're turning it into fact, and when you have conflicting perspectives, which often happens, there really is no fact.
I mean, in the case of Morton, in relation to Morton's own behavior, because we had his book, so we could use that. So what we see Morton doing with the Arab village, the local Arab population, that is based on his account of what he did. So that is like taken from his own version of what happened.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about the production. I know you didn't shoot it in Israel. Tell us a little bit about that process.
Well, we've been trying to make the film for a long time. As I said, the idea started a long, long time ago, 14, 15 years ago. We had two or three fairly serious efforts to make it before we finally did. The first one was going to be, we were going to film in Israel. We did casting in Israel. We had an Israeli co-producer and so on. But to be honest, Tel Aviv then, the whole point about Tel Aviv then was that it was a brand new city. It was a very small city, low-rise city. And obviously Tel Aviv now looks nothing like that. And
Mhm.
having talked to other people who tried to film period stories in Tel Aviv and Israel generally, just it felt like it was going to be very hard. And when we looked at the archive, the film archive, it just felt like actually we could probably find things closer to it elsewhere. And we looked around, we went to various countries, but in the end we chose southern Italy. And I think if you look at the archive that's in our film of the kind of Tel Aviv as it's being built in the 20s and 30s, and then what we shot in southern Italy, it was a really great match. The landscape is the same Mediterranean landscape, but also the style of the building and the kind of like the feel of the towns and the smaller towns. It felt, a really great place to try and recreate 1930s Tel Aviv.
It feels right. I was somebody who knows Tel Aviv well. Watching it kind of gave it a little bit of a fresh edge and didn't look too different than what I imagined it to be.
Yeah.
Um, so my last big question to you is, so it's now 2024. You made this in I guess over a year ago. Why is it important to tell this story now? A story that happened over 70 years ago.
I think, well, obviously, one element of making a film is, I think the actual relationship between Tom and Shoshana is an interesting relationship, a powerful relationship, and I hope we captured that in the film. I think Irina Starchenbaum and Douglas Booth did a great job in bringing those two characters to life. So in a way, it depends on that and on that relationship. But I think also, basically, it's trying to explore the way in which political violence kind of affects individuals, affects people, affects society but more broadly, but also individuals' lives. Yeah, I've done quite a few films in the past that have kind of looked at different forms of political violence. I did a film a long time ago about bombing in Sarajevo. I did a film about Daniel Pearl being beheaded in Pakistan. I did a film about three young British people being tortured in Guantanamo. And I think, Stern believed in the power of violence. He believed in the importance of violence to build Israel. And so really the film is looking at the way in which once violence starts to be part of the system, part of the society, how difficult it is to escape it as individuals. So, for me, Shoshana's journey is a really powerful journey. She starts off in love with a British person, a British police officer. Uh, she believes, like her father was a famous Zionist, she believes that Jews and Arabs can live peacefully together. And gradually, you see the impact of the violence on the relationship between with her and Tom, and then also in the after this, more obviously Tom's killed. It has a very big impact on their personal relationship, but also it ends up with Shoshana, you fighting alongside the followers of Stern, people that she sort of thought of as fascists, before, but she's now fighting alongside them against first the British and against the Arabs. So in her journey, you see the way in which violence can affect people's lives. Not, I think, because Shoshana changes her beliefs or her ideas or ideals, but because the situation's changed. And when I think the aim of terrorism, the aim of violence, is to push people into two opposing camps where you can't really have dialogue. And more broadly, in the 20s and 30s in Tel Aviv, there was an ongoing dialogue between Britain as a colonial power, as the occupying power, and the local Jewish population. But like the idea was the violence was to break that, and of course it did break. And once you get to the point where it's a war, you just have to be on one side or the other. And so Shoshana's journey traces that impact.
Thank you so much. How was the film received in the UK?
To be honest, our first screening in the UK was on 7th October. It was we were at the London Film Festival. We were there with several of our actors from Israel, and they were sort of like hearing what was going on in Israel as we were sort of watching the film. So obviously it was a
Wow.
kind of bizarre time. It was an incredibly bizarre time. So in Britain, as in America, as in Italy, and various other countries, as in Israel, the release was delayed, and that it's because obviously at a time when those such big events are happening as what was happening on the 7th of October and what's been happening since in Gaza, people perhaps it feels wrong to have a film like this. But in the end, the film is about the the impact violence has, and obviously, unfortunately, recently it's been in the real world, it's been so huge that it's hard to really sort of think about it in relation to an individual film.
Yeah, it was relevant before October 7th, and obviously even more relevant now. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing this with us and being with us here. Sorry not to have you there in person, and we look forward to sharing with you the audience responses.
Thanks very much. Thank you.